Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be going over another budget deck from Special Booster 1.5, and this time it is going to be a yellow budget deck, and unfortunately yellow is one of those colors where you do kind of need to just have the starter deck, because the starter deck is just the core of yellow. So outside of getting the starter deck, this is going to be a relatively cheap deck to get, and it's definitely looking like a pretty interesting and pretty powerful deck depending on how you choose to play it. So going over the deck, starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Upamon. So Upamon is just one of the best Digitama that we have currently in the game, if not the best Digitama, just because its inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, if we have 3 or fewer security, then we get to draw 1 card. So Upamon just allowing us to draw cards is really, really good, and being at 3 security isn't necessarily the most impossible thing to be at. And then the last Digitama of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Tokomon. So Tokomon is coming from the starter deck and is definitely a really good Digitama for this deck, just because this deck is going to be playing a lot with DP reduction. So Tokomon being able to increase our Digimon's DP by 1,000 is definitely something we're really looking at trying to gain out of the card. So if you wanted to run more Tokomon just for the buffs, then you're more than welcome to. I just value the card draw a little bit more than the buffs, but it's a budget deck, so you can kind of play with whatever you want. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Labramon. So Labramon is really, really nice just because it is basically another card draw engine for the deck, because again, we are going to be playing a lot with DP reduction. So we get to draw a card every time one of our opponent's Digimon is deleted through having its DP being dropped to 0. So this is just absolutely fantastic for the deck overall, and with Labramon and Upamon, you definitely can get a whole bunch of card draw going. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Salamon. So this Salamon is really, really nice because she has the really powerful inheritable ability of when attacking, we get to minus 1,000 DP on one of the opponent's Digimon. So we could start stacking up instances of minus DP to end up deleting the opponent's Digimon, and Salamon is definitely great for just helping us stack minus DP instances. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Lopmon. So Lopmon is really, really good because she has this nice on-play ability where we get to look at the top card of our security stack, and then we may add that card to our hand. And then if we do add that card to our hand, then we get to draw 1 card. So Lopmon is basically drawing us 2 cards potentially, and is reducing our own security, so that way we could put ourselves into Upamon range and other Digimons like thresholds, because a lot of the Digimon are playing with the fact that we need to have 3 or less security. So if they're trying not to attack our security, Lopmon is a great way of reducing our own security while gaining us some extra card draw in the process. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Patamon. So Patamon is another starter deck card, and it's basically acting almost the exact same as Labramon, except the only difference is we're not drawing a card and we're gaining memory, and Patamon is once per turn where Labramon is not once per turn. So those are really the only differences, but the fact that we have another card to reward us for reducing our opponent's Digimon's DP to 0 is definitely something we're really looking at, because we need those types of abilities to make the most out of our effects. Next, on to the champions. I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gatomon. So this version of Gatomon is in here for basically the exact same reasons as Salamon, where we're really just looking to utilize its inheritable ability to just continue stacking instances of minusing DP onto the opponent's Digimon, so that way we could delete them that much easier. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Turuiemon. So Turuiemon is another really fantastic Digimon just because he has some slightly higher DP compared to a lot of other Digimon in his level, and he has a really low Evo cost, making him really good at being a very efficient tempo tool. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Unimon. So Unimon is from the starter deck, and he is going to be the dedicated blocker of the deck, and that's really the only reason why we're running him. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Sirenmon. So Sirenmon is another very fantastic Digimon just because this is another very efficient tempo tool, where if we just need to raw play it, then we're totally fine with raw playing it, and then if we want to digivolve up into it, then it's very efficient for us to digivolve up into. So it's just overall a very tempo efficient card. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Antylamon. So Antylamon is just another very fantastic tempo tool where it has a nice low evo cost for 2 compared to a lot of other Digimon in its level. We're not really going to be utilizing it for its play cost, but the fact that it has some slightly higher DP makes it so that we are okay to want to aggress with it right away if we feel like we need to utilize the card for that. But again, most likely we're just going to be utilizing this card as a really tempo efficient stepping stool to get into our higher stages just because of the low evo cost. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of SlashAngemon. So SlashAngemon is just a very fantastic card for this deck just because it's doing the exact same thing as Salamon and Gatomon, where it's just adding another instance of being able to reduce the opponent's DP. And like I said, the more we stack those up, the easier it becomes to delete the opponent's Digimon. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of SlashAngemon. So SlashAngemon is probably one of the best Megas that we have for this style of deck, just because he has this really powerful when Digivolving ability where one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 8,000 DP for the turn. So this is really, really good because he could potentially delete a whole bunch of Digimon. And if we keep stacking those minus instances of DP from our lower levels as an inheritable, then even if he can't kill something right away, maybe if he swings, then we could add more DP reduction to that Digimon to potentially delete it. So SlashAngemon is just a very fantastic and very powerful Digimon for the deck, despite having some relatively low DP. And then the last Mega of the deck is going to be 4 copies of ClavisAngemon. So ClavisAngemon is a really fantastic card to be playing around with on a budget, just because he's doing some very similar things to SlashAngemon and the starter deck Seraphimon, except a little bit different. So this card has a really nice when attacking ability where if we have 3 or fewer security cards, then one of our opponent's Digimon gets minus 6,000 DP until the end of the turn. So in combination with, let's just say, SlashAngemon, Gatomon, and Salamon, we could potentially minus a 9,000 DP every time this card swings, and if he ends up living through the security checks, then this ability will just keep happening every single turn until he is deleted, and that could be very, very brutal for the opponent because minus 9,000 DP is quite a lot. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Eden's Javelin. So Eden's Javelin is just a really fantastic option card for trying to reduce the opponent's DP even more. So its main ability is we get to draw 1 card, and then for each card in our hand, then we get to minus 1,000 on one of the opponent's Digimon. So that's kind of why we're just trying to draw a whole bunch of cards, is just so we can make Eden's Javelin that much more powerful if it's seen. And then it has a really nice security effect of activating its main effect, so that way this card is always online wherever it is. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 2 copies of 7 Heavens. So 7 Heavens is another pretty strong option card for just reducing the opponent's DP, because its main ability is that we get to minus 1 of the opponent's DP by 10,000 for the turn, and then it has the nice security effect of activating its main effect. And 7 Heavens is just a really powerful removal card for the deck, just because, again, we could start stacking up minus DP instances to make this card even more efficient than it normally would be. And then there's just a whole bunch of other really powerful cards that you could think about utilizing with this style of deck. So as an alternate Digitama, you could think about running Nyaromon or Cupimon, just because they are some really decent Digitama to be playing around with. Cupimon just allows us to be drawing some extra cards, but he does have a little bit of anti-synergy considering we want to be at that 3 security threshold, where Cupimon wants us to be at 5. So I just think as the better alternate Digitama that you could think about running, Nyaromon just is a little bit better just because he has this nice inheritable ability of during the opponent's turn, while this Digimon is suspended, all your security Digimon get plus 1,000 DP. So this way, even if we're not really trying to utilize the card for much else, he's still going to passively be increasing the DP on our security Digimon, and that could be pretty decent. Next, we could be thinking about running Salamon. So Salamon is a really decent Digimon for the deck, just because we are going to try to be at that 3 threshold. So if we go too low, then we could be in a little bit of trouble. So Salamon having this nice on deletion ability, where if we have 3 or fewer security, then we get to recover 1, is really nice just to help keep us within a very healthy security count. Next, we could also think about playing Angemon. So this version of Angemon is really nice just because he has an on-play ability where one of our opponent's Digimon gets minus 3000 DP for the turn. So he's basically like an option card on legs, and that's just already pretty decent, even though he does cost 5 to play, which is a little on the high end and something we generally don't want to do. The fact that he still can be a really good finisher to just end the turn off is really, really nice and definitely a really decent card to think about utilizing. Next, we could run something like Silphymon. So even though Silphymon is a red card, it could go into a red or yellow deck, and it has the nice passive ability where during your turn, this card is treated as a yellow Digimon. So this makes for a great transition point if you want to think about using a little bit of red high end, or if you just want to utilize this card for its when Digivolving ability to try to make it easier to delete the opponent's Digimon. Then its when Digivolving ability is really good at doing that because it changes the original DP of one of the opponent's level 4s to 1000. So with a lot of the decent inheritable abilities that we have on trying to reduce their DP, Silphymon is just a great card to combo with that because it can instantly delete basically any level 4 you feel like. Next, we could think about running Mistymon. So Mistymon is another really fantastic Digimon just because it's doing something very similar to Angemon, where it has this nice on-play ability where 2 of the opponent's Digimon get minus 3000 DP till the end of the turn. So this is just a slightly stronger version of Angemon on a slightly higher level, so that way we could be like, okay, hard play Mistymon, then Digivolve Mistymon into something else, and that's very, very powerful. Or we could just try to utilize Mistymon as a turn ender, similar to how we would want to incorporate Angemon. So the card is still just really decent just because it's trying to reduce the opponent's DP. Next, we could think about utilizing Antylamon. So this version of Antylamon is really nice because she has 2 very powerful abilities. Her first ability is a when Digivolving ability, where one of your opponent's Digimon gains security tech -2 until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this is basically just trying to make it so that the opponent's Digimon can't hurt our security, so that way we can keep our security as healthy as possible. And then what you really want to try to think about utilizing the card for is her inheritable ability, where she has a nice when attacking ability. If you have a 3 or fewer security, then you get to play 1 yellow level 3 for free, and that's just really, really powerful because we can start utilizing some really interesting synergies and try to like build a go wide strategy and just kind of be as powerful as we possibly can. Next, you could think about running the Antylamon from the starter deck. So the Antylamon from the starter deck is kind of doing a very similar role as the Antylamon from BT-03, where you have this when Digivolving ability, where if your security is at 3 or less, then you get to recover 1. So basically the whole idea on trying to Digivolve into this Antylamon is to just keep our security as healthy as possible. Next, you could also think about running Magnadramon. So Magnadramon is another really fantastic Digimon at just trying to keep us alive, just because it has a nice on-play ability where if our security is 3 or less, then we get to recover 2. So that just makes the card really, really powerful to run. And then on top of which, she has a really nice when attacking ability where we get to play 1 yellow level 3 from our hand for free. So it's doing basically almost the exact same thing, if not better, as the Antylamon from BT-03. And again, that's just really powerful because it allows us to just jam bodies on board and create all that extra pressure onto the opponent. And then, like I said, if you really don't feel like running ClavisAngemon or SlashAngemon, you could think about running the Seraphimon from the starter deck. I'm just not super thrilled with the card just because he has an evo cost of 4 and only 10,000 DP, so he basically is just a slightly worse version of ClavisAngemon, except his ability, unlike ClavisAngemon, doesn't have a restriction, but it is less DP reduction. So he has a when attacking ability where one of the opponent's Digimon gets up minus 4,000 DP, which again, that's kind of just what the deck is trying to do. So this is still a pretty decent card to think about picking up and playing with the deck, especially if you're just buying a yellow starter deck and you're just looking for some quick upgrades. And then the last card that I want to highlight is Bifrost. So Bifrost is a pretty interesting card because this card actually is just doing a lot. So its main ability is one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 3,000 DP, and it gets a security tech -1 until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this card is doing basically like 2 things for us, where it's reducing the opponent's DP and it's reducing their security tech. So we could use this as a finisher to try to reduce their DP to 0 utilizing this card, or if we know we can't, then we know for a fact that they won't be able to do security damage because they'll be inflicted with security tech -1. So whether we utilize it as a finisher or a survival card, it's still just a pretty decent card to run for that. And then on top of which it has a really nice security ability where one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 3000 DP and minus security tech 1 for the turn. So the big difference between the security ability and the main ability is the main ability is the debuff and the security tech -1 lasts until the opponent's next turn. So this is just what makes the main ability really powerful. But even if it's checked in the security, it could still reduce the DP and reduce the damage. So it's still really good to run for that as well. So for the most part, this is just kind of my general list on what I like to label as the double Angemon deck, where you're just trying to reduce the opponent's DP and build as powerful as a board state as you possibly can. I do understand that the deck does have some weaknesses where the DP on a lot of our megas are relatively low, but like I said, you could just run like more Tokomons to try to mitigate that. But for the most part, if you're just buying a yellow starter deck and you don't know what to do, then this is just a really powerful deck that you could try to build for as cheap as possible and still be a very devastating and very efficient deck to just run. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, I'll have the deck list down in the description below, and feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And I do have a TCG Player affiliate link also down in the description below. So if you're buying your cards off of TCG Player, using that link will help support me and the channel. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.